Good evening. On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation.
Breaking news we're seeing now in the United States. The US Justice Department has launched a criminal inquiry into the US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The investigation will focus on the central bank's renovation of its Washington headquarters. It's been reported that this inquiry will look into whether he lied to Congress about the scope of the project. But we have seen a response now from Jerome Powell himself, releasing a video message. He believes the Justice Department is using the threat of criminal prosecution to pressure the central bank to lower interest rates, something that Donald Trump has publicly said he wants to see happen. Have a look.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
We're going to continue to monitor this breaking news out of the United States, and we may get an update from the US President Donald Trump. He's been flying back to the US Capitol. We'll monitor developments closely as to whether he has anything to say in response.
We inherited high prices. We inherited a mess. We inherited the greatest inflation in history. And you know what was knocking it down? The bad economy that we inherited. We inherited bad. We now have the hottest economy in the history of our country. We have $18 trillion being invested in the United States. You have, every one of you have car plants, AI plants, plants of all different types. Because of tariffs. I hope we get the good ruling from the Supreme Court. I only hope we do, because it's given us tremendous national security. So let me just finish up, because, you know, I weave. I love to weave. If you ever weave and don't come back to the point, then that's a problem. Then you say, but when you weave and you go here and boom, 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 always coming back, then you're in good shape. But what's happening is, by doing what I did, we're getting numbers that are so low.
I thought as we came up to the end of the first real week of the year, it was only fair to have a look at the past and where we're going. And you know what? I was thinking about this today, and I reckon that it's only fair to say, as we close it out, that the first quarter of the 21st century, well, hasn't really lived up to expectations. I mean, instead of flying cars, what did we get? We got 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan, Gaza, a global migration crisis, the COVID pandemic, the invasion of Ukraine, and China threatening to pull the trigger on Taiwan. Feel free, by the way, to add your own disasters to the list at home. Even our most remarkable technologies that we developed, smartphones and AI, well, They've mostly just made us lose our ability to think while feeding us an endless diet of cat videos and deepfakes. Which is a real shame because, you know what? I still want my flying car. Yet, that said, there is a little glimmer of hope as we enter the second quarter of the 21st century that things might, and I say repeat, might, just be looking up. Here's why I say that. Because when you put aside all the black-pilling commentary about the end of the post-World War II order, you know, all the stuff about how suddenly it's Trump and not the very nature of humanity that is causing war and chaos all over the place, two things reveal themselves. One, contrary to all the talk about a new age of dictators and strongmen, if you look at it, freedom is actually on the move and in places where no one previously had dared to hope to see it happen. And the second point is that around the globe, the enemies and adversaries of the West are actually beginning to teeter under the weight of political and economic crises. I mean, the massive pro-freedom, anti-regime protests in Iran obviously are Exhibit A in all of this, and a story that deserves far more attention than it has for the most part received in the West. Because after all, since 1979, when mad Shiite clerics took over the country, Iran has been a disaster both for its own people and the world, crushing its citizenry at home and sponsoring terror organizations like Hezbollah that spread death and destruction around the Middle East and beyond. Today, though, funny thing is happening. The regime appears to finally be on the brink. The country is in the midst of a currency crisis, and demonstrators have been burning government buildings across the nation. According to one report of the Times of London, the country's leadership has a plan to flee to Russia if things finally get so bad that their enforcers switch sides, stop shooting civilians, and join the protests. Venezuela, too, has some hope now for change with the removal of socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro, though it is sure to be a long road before that country becomes the prosperous democracy it was in the 20th century. That said, Maduro's removal by the U.S. President Donald Trump, which was howled over and lamented over by those who think dictators should be allowed to hide behind the fig leaf of international law, is a necessary first step to freedom. Even so, Maduro's hasty exit at the hands of a Delta Force removal team has set off something of a chain reaction. In nearby Cuba, which has withered under communist dictatorship since 1959, well, again, that nation is on the brink of economic collapse as well, with its Venezuelan oil supplies cut off. Russia, which in the old days of the Cold War was Cuba's chief sponsor as it looked to taunt the U.S., is in similar trouble. They're burning through cash to support their war effort in Ukraine and are hamstrung by the same sanctions that war has provoked. As a result, the resource-rich Putin government is going to be one of the biggest losers as Venezuelan oil floods the market, keeping prices down. You may have already noticed that at the pump. Early days again, but here's to the good guys getting some runs on the board in the second quarter of the 21st century.